Hey everyone, it's Erin, and I'm back from Japan, ready to get back on this YouTube train with this cool piece of concept art by Mary Blair that she did for Disney's 1950s Cinderella. Okay, we've got the primary set of acrylic gouache plus black and white. We've got a paper towel and lots of brushes. I'm using like 5 or 6 brushes here, and I use all of them. It baffles me. Usually I just use one. I've got a yogurt lid, water, and illustration board, which is my favorite surface to work on. It can take the water that you need to mix with gouache, but it also is not textured or porous or, sort of, absorbent is the word I'm looking for. So you get a really nice smooth finish. So I have my illustration board taped off with washi tape, which keeps things nice and clean when you take it off. And here's the piece of concept art that we're doing. And I just want to plan out here how much of this canvas will be sky. Like what percentage does it take up? And we'll have to make sure that, it all can fit into this dimension. It's funny because I'm kind of getting confused here because I'm watching my hands. And while I was recording this video originally, I was actually talking my way through the process for an online course that I teach, which actually I'll be teaching another round of in November. If you want to know more, there's a link in the description. But I'm talking as I was actually recording this, so I'm doing different things with my hands than I'll be narrating with my mouth. So this could get really confusing. If you're not already confused, just wait. All right, let's try to do this. I am mixing together a color called Viridian. It's one of my favorites. It's sort of a shade of spring green. It's between green and teal on the color wheel. And it's darker than teal, though. It's dark in value. So we add black to something to give it a darker value, typically. And in this case, the Viridian that we're trying to match is a high value Viridian. So there's white as well in it. So I'm just going to test out. So basically I'm mixing together my white and black to create the gray that will be added to the Viridian. This Viridian in Mary's piece, like so many of her colors, is just slightly diminished as well. So that's another reason why we're adding that gray. Just to clarify, so Viridian has a darker value no matter what overall value it is. So it can be a high value, which means it's much lighter, or it can be a darker value. Like every other color, it can be higher or dark or lower in value. And in this case, creating this gray here just helps me get to the precise value of that Viridian. And I've been using Procreate to help me figure out how much white and black to mix together to get the right gray. So I'm not sponsored by Procreate. I wish I was. I just got monetized. That's it. That was all a coincidence. I'm definitely not sponsored, but I have I don't even have 2,000 followers, or is it followers? No, subscribers. I'm totally digressing. I'm sorry. So I'm going back to this color. So I'm creating this Viridian. I'm going to add some gray to it. We're going to get it to be that nice desaturated Viridian that Mary Blair uses. And then we'll paint the sky. Sounds so poetic. And then we'll paint the sky. Let's talk about texture. This is something I really wanted to cover in this video because it is something that people ask about. It's something I struggled with. A lot of my students struggle with it, and that's getting the right consistency to have a nice smooth finish that's pretty opaque. I mean, you always end up doing 2 or 3 coats anyway with gouache, or typically you do. So you want this consistency where it's smooth enough to roll, or not roll, to stroke across your page without it sticking, without it feeling rough, or if you want a dry brush effect, that's different. But in this case, we want this to be a nice smooth stroke across the page. So you just keep adding water until you have that smooth feeling, but that it's not so watered down that things end up being transparent. And the only way to know that truly is by testing it out. And testing it out enough and painting with gouache enough, you'll get to the point where you'll know exactly how much water to put in because you'll feel it, right? So at this point, I'm feeling it. And I'm also testing that hue, that high value viridian, just to see how it looks when it dries, because gouache typically dries darker when it dries, but depending on the pigments, because a few pigments dry lighter. I actually can't even think of which ones do right now, but I know there's a couple that do. But usually things dry darker, so you always, it's helpful to paint swatches. Realizing I need it to be a little higher in value. And I'm constantly adding or replenishing that water, because you want it to stay at that creamy consistency, but it will slowly start to kind of congeal or dry, and it'll get thicker. So now here I am being very conscious about where I need that sky, because I don't have an infinite amount of this paint. I really want to use my paint wisely. So instead of doing the entire background, I do the upper half. I also don't want to do the bottom because there will be some canvas showing through. There's some areas in the road that are white, and so we might as well use the white of the page. Okay, we're going to fill in the sky. We're using a bigger brush now, which makes way more sense. I was just using the smaller brush because I'd used it to mix my paint, so I wanted to use that leftover paint from the brush, and now I've switched to I think it's a 1-inch flathead brush. And if you look at the top, you'll see that first coat is a little bit transparent, but that's okay. I know I'm going to go over it. It'll be fine, smoothing things out, but not going over it too many times. And the top stroke there is slightly darker. So I did add a little bit more white to the bottom part of the sky. So a very, very subtle gradient happening there. Cool. Okay, so now that it's dried, before I put in the darker dry brush effect over top of the sky, I'm mapping out where the road is, because I'm going to use the leftover high value viridian that I have, and I'm going to paint the section of the composition where the buildings are, and the center building has this light viridian color in it. So instead of remixing it later, I just use what I have on my palette, adding a little bit more of that light gray. And then I just use this to paint in where that building will be. I'm being super conscious about where to put this stroke, because I want it to be, almost right in the center here where that building will be. And then adding a little bit more water to it to blend it out. It's just a bit too unblended. There we go. And then I use some of the excess here to just block in where the other buildings will be. And it isn't a solid, it does sort of gradiate outwards and become more transparent. Yeah, it's those little things that I really enjoy observing when I start to do these, or when I start to use reference of any kind, really, is you get into this place where you're really tuned in and you're starting to see these nuances in where paint should be or how paint blends. And it's a great feeling. It does not last through this whole process, because I get to some points in this piece where I don't know where I am or what I'm doing or who I am. It gets very confusing, but I come back from it. I survive it. All right, so using this angle head brush as one of my dry brush textures, I've created a darker version of the sky, so added more black, and then I did a little test run. And this is one of the great things about having swatches, is that you can test out how different layers work together, is what I'm trying to say. Like, how is that dry brush going to look over top of the sky? And is this color dark enough? is this brush going to give me the right effect? And so by testing it out on the swatch, it's very helpful. It's great to see how colors will interact as well. So if you have a swatch down and you're thinking of using, a particular color, you can just test it out on your little swatch and see how they work together. And as always, the dry brush secret, not so secret is it's all about pressure. So the more I push down on my brush, the more paint will be deposited on the canvas. And then when I ease up on the pressure, we get these a more textured effect, sort of diffuse texture there. And then we want it a little bit heavier around the edge, so it's more of a vignette. And there we have it. We're moving on now to the road, and you can see, I'm sorry, part of the video got lost, lost footage somewhere. But I had just blocked in the road with gray, and now I'm doing the other side, which is lighter, which adds to the great light and shadow of this piece. And looking at Mary's work, she was all about the contrast between light and dark, adding a lot of drama to her work. And here we are with this. Is this the move? Is this the trademark swoosh and flick? From another Cinderella video, actually. I think that, Mary was doing a lot of swoosh and flick for that series of concept arts. Oh my goodness. I'm doing this at night. I do this usually first thing in the morning with, after some coffee, but now I'm doing it at night after some wine. So I just had like one glass of wine with my dinner, but it's enough. It's enough these days with my jet lag. Okay, so continuing on with the road, a bunch of grays, a little bit of, what did I put in? A little bit of blue as well, that meridian. I said a bunch of grays, and then I immediately imagined like a whole bunch of little aliens running down the street that I'm painting. I really am jet lagged. Which, speaking of which, I will be doing some shorts on my art adventure through Japan with my friend Gina. I have some video clips that I'm going to put together for this channel eventually. So with the road, leaving that white from underneath, from the canvas coming through to add to the sense of light and dark and sort of create like a reflection. It almost feels like it just rained, It's got this kind of wet look. Dry brush making wet look. It happens. And I'm using a smaller brush now. So this is why I have so many brushes, because in this case, a smaller flat head is useful because I'm doing such a narrow area. I don't want the dry brush to get out, to go outside of the lines, basically, the lines of the road. So I got to use a smaller brush. It's fun. Lots of different marks being made in this piece. It's a very dynamic, there's a lot of movement happening, which makes sense because this is the scene where Cinderella's rushing back home in her pumpkin couch. I was going to say couch. Imagine. But her coach is about to turn back into a pumpkin. The clock is chiming. It's like this panic moment, and she's rushing. So it's really cool how Mary would, use brush strokes and dry brush textures to create the sense of movement or the sense of light. It's very dramatic and dynamic. And in this piece in particular, because the buildings too, the way the brush strokes create the different buildings, it just, the whole thing has a sense of speed and I was going to say panic. It is kind of a panicky scene. But Mary was so, innovative with her use of textures and of colors, to make buildings pastel pink and, cornflower blue is pretty unusual. She's an unusual artist. Oh, this dry brush is so fun to do when it's this dark on that lighter gray, that contrast, and really being able to see the texture. Ooh, it's so delicious. I've got my canvas turned towards me so I can pull towards me, which is, I find it easier because I'm trying to create more tapered lines. So easing up on the pressure, pulling it towards me seems to be the way to do it for me. I have more control. I like having control. Who doesn't? Who's like, you know what? I don't want to have any control over anything. I guess there are people like that. I'm like, I can't imagine. These were fun too. These little, I guess, cobblestone sort of rocky roadway, rocky road. But they're fun because they're sort of mindless. You just get into the rhythm. I love when I have to paint something over and over and I find the rhythm. It's nice. It's meditative. As so much of art making is. Or it's torturous. One or the other. There's no in between. Okay, now we're going to mix up some cornflower blue. That's what I'm going to call this. It's sort of a periwinkle cornflower. In other words, it's a warm blue, but it's high value. So we've got our ultramarine and we've got white, and we're adding the smallest amount of cyan to it, and it creates this really lovely color. What does this color make me think of? What does it make you think of? I want to know. It's like such a baby blue. I lived in an apartment that had this color throughout. It was not an easy color to decorate around, but anyway, it felt like I lived inside of a cake because the molding was all white and then had these like baby blue walls, sort of light periwinkle. Okay, we're blocking the buildings. And I do this by adding quite a bit of water to some white. I'm doing more opaque buildings in the center here, but just blocking in where they will be, because as you can see on the concept art, the buildings are light in color and you can see some white behind them. So yeah, just block these in first. All right, and I'm covering up this sky as well. Or we don't want that sky to show through. Using a flathead brush that's a bit smaller. I think this is a 1/3 or something. Anyway, it's a smaller flathead brush, but it's what to use when you want to create rectangular shapes. Way easier. And now we get to use that lovely blue. I've added a little more water. So you do want to add more water when you want things to be smoother or more transparent. So it isn't like there's just one consistency of gouache that works, but it all depends on what you're painting and how you want it to look. So just trying to get this kind of dry brush thing happening and these really tapered lines. So using that flathead brush is the way to go, because it gives you both thicker and thinner lines and a consistency in line. So I was looking through Mary Blair's, not physically looking through it. I was looking through it on YouTube, but the book that was brought out showcasing all of her work that she did for Cinderella. And it's incredible. Maybe I'll link it in the description, the video that I watched. But just so incredible to see all her pieces back to back that she did for Cinderella. And the sense that I got looking at them one after another was her play with scale. Like I'd already sort of realized, she's this master of color, these really innovative color palettes that are, highly emotive and moody. But I hadn't noticed how she uses scale, like the sense of scale in her pieces, not so much in this piece that I'm working on now, but some of the other pieces of the inside of the palace or the inside of Cinderella's house, or when she is going through the garden, like there's this feeling of, things being very grand. And then that, adding to the drama And then the sort of lighting that she did, a lot of high contrast shadows and light areas and all these things working together to elevate these scenes that otherwise would be pretty pedestrian, Cinderella, like princess in a room, like getting dressed up and being in a garden and just these places that could be really boring. Mary Blair brought so much drama and romance and intensity, right? And the movie really feels that way. It's been a long time since I've seen Cinderella. I have to revisit that one. Not this month though, because it's Halloween month. So I'm watching nothing but horror. And I have plans to watch The Ring, which I'm pretty scared about. And then I don't know, if I survive that, then I want to watch Possession, Rosemary's Baby. I have a list. What are your Halloween movies? What do you all like to watch on or around Halloween? Share it with me. I'm doing pink. Yay. This is the pink that I mixed magenta and white. Right? Is that what happened for any of you that were paying attention? I wasn't, that's for sure. But yeah, this adds to that, what I call an Easter palette, but it's, basically pastels. This color, this pink is kind of reminding me, it's giving me like Dusty Rose vibes. And that was my joke old lady name. So you know how I don't know if you've all done this, but I have this game that I played with my girlfriends where we'd come up with like what our name would be when we're 90 years old. And one of my favorite colors is Dusty Rose. So that became my like old lady name. Dusty Rose. She's dusty. She's Dusty Rose. That's so sad. Anyway, this is like a dusty rose, this color, this lovely pink, because there's a little bit of gray in it. So that, just like Dusty Rose, the old lady, which is who I'm going to be one day, not too far from now. I'm saying so many things right now. It's because I had one glass of wine. This is what happens. Boop. I'm starting to do the carriage before. It hasn't turned into a pumpkin yet. She's still okay. This is like the clock has only struck 9 or 10 at this point, I'm guessing. And always adding a bit more white or not more white, but add a little bit of white to yellow so that it's not as transparent. And just quickly, I was sort of getting that first coat down and figuring out where it is in space so that I can work around it and put the other elements along the road. Because spacing here is quite important. And there were a lot of different elements to work with. So I got that out of the way. And then I fix up the road because I realized, there's all this white space here that should be road. So I start to fix that up. Okay, so while I'm fixing that up, I do have a question. Another question for everyone. Did any of you used to sneak out when you were teenagers? Because when I was editing this video, I started to think about my own sort of midnight runs, right? Like leaving the house at around midnight, getting back before the parents wake up. And I was just wondering, like, did other people do that? And of course they did, but I'd love to hear your stories. Like I used to, I know my mom's watching this. So Mom, you can go ahead and comment if I'm wrong about this or not. Or, you can defend yourself if you need to. But when I was a teenager, when I was around, I guess, 15, I snuck out a few times and I would sneak out of the window underneath my parents' room. And then one night my mom was like, hey, if you're going to sneak out, use the back sliding door because we can hear you. And it was so sweet because she wanted me to just be able to go and have a good time. She knew I wasn't doing anything too horrendous because I was a bad kid, but I wasn't that bad of a kid. Not that that's bad. I wasn't doing anything she really worried about. So yeah, so that's cute. And I think my favorite sneak out that I ever had was some girls and I went swimming at a public pool, like that we shouldn't have been swimming at. That was really fun. But anyway, I just wanted to know, like, tell me about your midnight runs. And I'm not asking that because I want you to all comment. Although I do, I miss I only have like a few people that comment, but I do miss you all. It's been way too long since my last video. Weeks. Feels like years. Okay. This whole video is starting to feel like years, isn't it? We're putting in the roofs. The roofs are, this is when everything starts to get tied together. And honestly, I think I jumped to this step before putting in the horses and the lampposts, is because I really wanted things to look cleaned up. And they didn't really look cleaned up until you start to put in these dark graphic shapes. And this is something else Mary Blair was brilliant at doing, was combining the loose with the controlled, right? Like these loose textured brush strokes that are quick and rough, and then balancing that, contrasting that with very graphic shapes that were filled with opaque color, planes of color. And yeah, it's just such a great contrast. And I've actually started to do this in my own practice. Like, this is one of those things that I've borrowed from Mary's brain. And I'm always like, thank you, Mary. Thank you for being so unique and innovative, and someone I've wanted to really emulate and research and start to figure out what makes her work so good. Okay. I was just sort of losing myself there for a sec. We're doing some of the smaller details now, and I'm using a brush that's a little too big for this, but I'm going for it. Look at me go. Oh, that's because I'm also going to do a few roofs. Oh, I see. I made this video a few months ago, so I'm not really sure. What was I thinking? I don't know what I was thinking like 2 hours ago, let alone a month ago. I got too much in my brain. Okay. Chimneys, yes. Details, yes. Everything, tying everything together with the black, as always, just making it. That sounded like a title for an album, like tying it all together with the black. It's so okay. I don't know. I just thought of like a big black ribbon. Okay. It's late. I'm sorry, folks. I'm sorry. I'm not going to re-record though. I'm just going to keep going. We can keep going. This part was so fun. These lines, the little wiggly, decorative, I guess, wrought iron roof, really fun to paint lines like that. Just loosen up, let yourself go. Don't think about it. It's really liberating. I enjoy it so much. When I put this roof on, I realized, there's some pink areas missing. So I fixed that up, which we'll get to. And what else? Is there anything else that I wanted to share? It's funny, every time I do another piece of Mary's, I like figure out something new about either her or the movie that she was working on. And in this case, I found out that Cinderella was the first film that Disney did, first animated film that did well at the box office besides Snow White, which came out in 1937. So for over a decade, they put out only flops. I mean, movies that are now classic. Alice in Wonderland was one of them, I believe. Was it, or was that after? Oh, shoot, I should look this up. Anyway, I was just reading it today. I should remember, but I'm jet lagged. So I'm jet lagged and I've had a glass of wine. So there you go. I'm like, I can't even believe I'm talking right now. And I also didn't go to sleep until 4 a.m. I did see the aurora though. Did anybody else from Vancouver or the northwest coast see the aurora last night? It was very minimal, but it was pretty cool. Like, the word that came to mind was undulating. It's like the perfect, I think like that word was made up for the aurora. So psychedelic and awesome. Okay. Speaking of psychedelic and awesome, we're getting to the details here that tie things together. But these details, again, are just so loose and gestural. Quick. The faster, the better. And we're going to head in. We're heading into the composition, getting a close-up where I get to do these lanterns, gaslight, street lights. whatever they are, they were super fun to paint. I love doing flourishes like that, or objects or elements like that. It almost feels like, like writing in calligraphy, or what. Actually, I can tie this back to a story from Japan. When I was just in Japan, Gina and I went to a moss garden, this beautiful moss garden that's on the grounds of a temple. And to go into the moss garden, you first have to write out a prayer, or I think several prayers, Buddhist prayers, and you do the calligraphic lines over the characters, like the Japanese characters. It's not, I don't think it's kanji, it's something else. It's like anyway, Japanese characters, beautiful calligraphic lines, and you trace over top of a very light version of them so that you can, get the strokes right. But you really have no idea what order to do each stroke in, like where do you start in each one? And it was, just an interesting exercise. And so doing stuff like this, even these horses that I'm about to do, it's like choosing sort of where you start and finish that shape. And with a detail like the lampposts, it's a lot more, I don't know, it just feels a lot more exciting to like figure out the best, most efficient, most graceful way to create that shape. Am I the only one that thinks like this? I know I'm not. I know some other like artist nerds out there are totally, if they're hearing this, they understand. These horses were, they were a pain in the ass, to be honest. It was a good challenge, but trying to figure out where those horse pieces go, because they're the horses that are behind the horses that are lit up. So we get the white horses, but then these horses, which would be white as well, but they're in the shadows, so they're dark. So I didn't want to paint them all dark because then the white wouldn't really show up over top of it. Long story short, it was not easy to paint just parts of horses. Excuse me. My throat is so dry from talking so much. I'm not used to doing this, everyone. It's been a while. Like I haven't talked at all in the last 3 weeks, as if. All right, so bringing in these adorable horses. I love painting these guys, the ones in the foreground. Much easier to do, although I'm still having a hard time getting the right texture with white paint. It does tend to be a little gloopier. But gloop or no gloop, with or without gloop, the horses still turned out pretty darn cute. Cute. And they're like simple shapes. Love it. As always, Mary bringing us so much action with simple shapes. I think part of why she makes it work so well is she really exaggerates her gestures, in this piece you can kind of see it with the horses, but in so many of her other pieces that have figures, like human figures in them, they're just super over exaggerated with their movements. Oh, these feathers were fun. And all of these details, again, super quick. Each thing is just its own brush shape, brush stroke. And love that. Love the energy. I say that in every video. You'll never not hear me say that. And that's it. Are we done? I think there's a little bit more to do here. I think we put some texture on the roofs, which is a fun little touch. This brush is not dry, so I don't know how the heck I got that kind of effect, but it works. Happy surprise, happy accident, everyone. Okay, and this whole video was like one happy accident. I enjoyed doing it, but I do apologize if it was a little off. Oh, look, I'm not even done. I forgot these weird little white windows. Like Mary throwing in random white windows that then make everything even more incredible. Voila. All right, removing the tape, the best part. And thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe if I didn't drive you crazy, and I'll see y'all soon.